Hello everybody, pleasure to see you at another day of the Krakow Film Festival, the 60th edition, and today we have a wonderful guest today with us, Mr. Anders Østergaard, Oscar nominated, Sundance nominated, with plenty of awards, other awards, documentary filmmaker, and well, he's not in Krakow obviously, but in Berlin. Yeah, he's presented his new film, Winter Journey, and thank you for that. And what a story! What a story! I was wondering, how did you come around it? Jüdischer Kulturband, and well, you know, there are so many Holocaust stories and so many films, and you think that you know all of them, and then there is the Jüdischer Kulturband, and here is another story to be told. And well, there are obviously many different stories that weren't shown in the screen, but you know, you have to come to them to find them. And I was wondering, but because this is not your personal story, this is something you found in a book. So if you could tell us a few words of the background.
Right. I was bored in an airport and came across a book on the persecution of Jews in the 30s, and I also thought I knew everything. But then I discovered the strange period before, in the early 30s, before they actually went towards all the killing of the Jews. They had a long period where they didn't really know what their policy was, and they kind of approached a kind of apartheid idea that Jews and non-Jews should live separately, and that so that there would be they organized a huge Jewish cultural league in the middle of Nazi Germany, organizing thousands of people. That intrigued me, but I think what convinced me that I could make a film was when I came across Martin Goldsmith's book, where he interviews his father about the past. Because here I found a platform to discuss broadly, not just the period, but also the generations after, the tensions between the survivors' generation and their children, all the taboos, the silence, all the hurt that is there but never talked about. Mm-hmm. So I was very intrigued by that. The third thing, and I think what intrigued me especially about the character George, the old man, is that he insists to be German. He's not a Jew, he's German. And you might think it's some kind of Stockholm syndrome, but it's deeper than that. It's because he felt that the Nazis had no right to take his Germanness away from him. And that opens up another perspective also, emotionally, and builds on an interest I in general have about the German Jew story.
This shows the whole scope kind of the betrayal that happened, because the Jews were the part of the society, and this idea that they are not the part of the society was obviously shocking, and everybody kind of had to work through it personally. There is the character, I mean, the one of the characters mentioned is the father of Rosemary. And when there is the crystal night, you mentioned that he goes to the father and he says, "Let's play, I'm not interested in it." And through this story you show the whole process of the denial, betrayal, and how everybody had to work through what is happening around them on this.
They had to make sense of what they saw, and they came to very different conclusions. Some decided it's time to leave. They left almost immediately in 1933. Others kept saying it can't be that bad. It will soon be over. I can't imagine that Germany will keep Hitler. And year went by year and all got worse. So of course it's also very much a story about denial, about when you realize that things are going the wrong way, and what perception you have, and how you would prefer to think that things are okay, because there's so many other good reasons to stay. This young couple loves music. In fact, the Kulturbund, that phenomenon brought them to Berlin to play with the best musicians in the country. It probably wouldn't have happened otherwise to them. And for them, so it was so double. At the one time, it was a terrible time. On the other hand, it was the best of times. They had the most exciting youth. They were newly in love. They were playing what they wanted the most to play music, and they did it in one of the most exciting capitals in the world. And I wanted, it was important for me to portray this double aspect of this time, to better understand how things are seen from the inside, so different from what we see when we look back on things.
Yeah, because we see, when we learn about history, when we see even Holocaust stories, we see often not so personal stories, and personal stories are never black and white. And with Jüdische Kulturband, it's absolutely amazing, and the complexity of it is quite fascinating, because they know that it is sort of a propaganda tool for Nazi Germany, but at the same time, as you say, this is a once in a lifetime chance for them, and
they gamble, because, and I might have done the same had I been a young musician. I say, it's not the best of ways, but look, this is a fantastic break. Let's stick it out. This Hitler guy must fall, and then we will be somewhere so much further with our music. Life is like that.
Exactly, and it's also interesting because the Jüdische Kulturband, as you said, there were thousands of people in it. Like, it started like with 2,000, something like that, and then historians say that there is like between 70,000 and 180,000 or more, because this is not only this was just one orchestra that we follow.
Yes.
And what also amazed me or surprised me was that it worked until 1941, when in Poland everything has already been happening, but just so close to Poland, and you had absolutely different world in a way, that Germany was playing this different game sort of for the Western Europe, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. That's it's absurd. There's so many surreal aspects to this, but they knew that they would have, as long as America had not yet joined the war against them, they were nervous about how the Americans looked at how they treat the Jews. I think they got away with much more brutality and crime from the beginning in Poland, because they were not the same attention. But Germany had already, through the 30s, German Jews had drawn the attention of Americans. And in the whole diplomatic political game, they tried to make slow moves and back and forth moves about it, which means you have a rather complex situation until the end of the So it's really, history is amazingly complicated.
There is the personal story, and there is the history and the facts, and there is the book. And I was wondering, what are the things that you couldn't put in the film, because it's like 85 minutes, and you need to follow some story in the frames of the film narrative. And I was wondering, what are the things that you wanted to put but had to just give them up because of the story you had to kind of.
It's funny, Dagmara, because it never feels that way, that, I like to talk about so many things, but I have to take something away. That's a collector's thinking. If you allow me, I'm a hunter's thinking. I have a hunter's thinking. I want to tell this story. And that story is already a condensation. So I don't feel a frustration that I have to leave out this and that aspect. I feel excitement to be able to sharpen and focus my story, and to, just give people enough information so that they can follow what's really important for me, which is the emotional exchanges between father and son. So, and because when things get emotional, they become universal. I am happy, the more you forget about the Holocaust, if you like, the more you look at this as a father-son fighting over the past in a universal way, which could happen in many places where there has been a traumatic past, not least Poland or Russia, where in many places where terrible things have happened and people have been involved in terrible ways. The more I can get into the focus of the father and son confrontation, the more universal the film can be. That's why I actually look for the simplest possible story to tell.
There is this another layer that you mentioned, because more universal one, that there is this urge for children to learn about their parents' past, and because the reasons the parents don't tell the past might be plenty of them. It might be traumatic, or it might be something different. And it's also quite amazing how Martin kind of gets to confrontation, and through his research he learns more and more about his father, and he probably starts to understand him at the end when we have this conversation. Why did you work for 35 years in a furniture store?
So he investigates the father quite simply because he has to know. He can't live on. He can hardly figure out who he is himself if he doesn't know what brought his parents to America and why there was this absence, this man who never was really there his whole childhood. And that, of course, is because of his survivor's guilt. His whole family was lost, and at the last minute, his father, also Martin's grandfather, tried to push the father to do everything he could, and he failed, and so he punished himself the rest of his life in America. So it's also about that. It's about the amnesia and not of the non-living of the survivors.
We don't learn that much about Martin's mother. We only know that she auditioned for the orchestra, and I would love to know more about her. Why didn't you? Well, you didn't because you wanted to concentrate, I guess, on the father-son relationship. Yeah. But I would really love to know more about her.
Well, she was a successful, when she came to America, became a very successful viola player and a soloist in important orchestras. So she certainly had a career. I think it's also mentioned in the film. But you're right that she does not appear on equal terms with the father, but that's actually because I choose to see everything from the father's perspective. So he looks at his wife, and she has, I like the way that she has enormous presence there, by the way they talk about her, because that's how family works. There are those who are in the family, and then the ghosts of the dead and the parts, and somehow they're also there. So I thought it more fruitful to have her talked about rather than she talks herself. Also because he stands up as a bit of an ideal. Every time George the father says about his youth that he was hesitating, didn't know what to do, she always knew what to do. She has strong instincts, and so she becomes a bit of a larger-than-life character, which I thought was good for this.
She's definitely present there, absolutely, and she's the reason for the choices that are being made. And here we come to the most, the most surprising is the subject itself, but the form that you decided to go. Probably this film could be told in a way like Talking Heads. I don't know, that somebody remembers how the Jüdische Kulturband worked or something like that, but you absolutely crossed all the genres that could go in the film, because this is a documentary, but kind of made like a fiction. And I was wondering, and there is the archive material, but also there are recreations, and I was wondering, how did you come to this form? This would be like the first part of the question, and the other, the challenges of it, because I guess there must have been plenty.
Mm-hmm. Well, I come to the form out of the pure bitter need to have some kind of visualization of what went on in the 30s in Germany, and very limited archive material in terms of moving archive. And I came quite soon to the idea, or we who worked on the film, to have to use still images and let our actors walk around in that with a green screen effect, for several reasons. First of all, because it's authentic. If you see a building, it's a real building. It's not something we reconstruct. For instance, the Gestapo headquarters in Berlin is gone today. You can't find that place. So you have to find something similar, and somehow you can smell when it's not the real thing. With photos, we had the real thing. But I also like the kind of poetic aspect that this character, the young man, is walking around in a frozen world. He's the only living character in a frozen world that I feel helps to underline his isolation and loneliness in that period. So we had, apart from authenticity, we had a kind of poetic added value, so to speak, to gain from that. So that's why I guess I was excited about doing this way. By the way, is this a documentary with a fiction style, or is it a fiction film with documentary style? I don't know, actually. For me, it's just a film, and I would say, if I really am pushed to define it as genre, to me, it's a drama. It's written, it's a script, as an actor. Everything is organized from the beginning to the end. And we have documentary styles, but I'm personally not convinced it's a documentary, actually.
Mm-hmm. There is definitely the dramatic. We follow the story, we follow the investigation, and we want to learn how it all happened and what was the story of the man really there. And because I kind of wanted to dig a little bit more into the archive footage, because there are not only those stills that were moved by the actors, but there are some archive footage in the film. And I guess that, like, from the, well, in the 20s there were some films being made, like Symphony of Berlin. You could find some fiction films also as well, but this is not really about 20s, it is about 30s, and that was the Nazi Germany, and this is the time of Leni Riefenstahl, of the pompous great country, and of the speeches of all the Nazi Germans. But this is, well, there is only, I think, one or two little parts of the speeches, just probably to give the background. But there you managed to find some living footage. Yes. And I was wondering, how and where did you got to, and was it a difficult task?
Oh yes, it is difficult, because the first thing that happened when Hitler took over is that the film business collapsed. The documentary film scene was actually quite vital in the late 20s. People running around in the street filming already then. Of course, that whole thing collapsed, because that you couldn't have free media like that running around. So the only thing that was left was propaganda and Wochenschau, right? But there was an American guy, and I must admit, at the moment the name eludes me, who had some very intriguing material. He worked pretty much undercover in the Third Reich, filming a lots of material, which is not sensational, but gives a wonderful sense of daily life, the ordinary streets, villages in the Third Reich. It's wonderfully shot, and so we use that quite extensively. But that is the exception to the rule. There's really very little moving images to find from the daily aspects of life, how normal people, ordinary people lived in Nazi Germany. It's incredibly difficult to find. So we had to pool together all kinds of sources with the help of Østergaard, my co-director, who really had that job in a serious way. We find a lot of private archive, particularly as for the Jewish families. And also sometimes just raiding YouTube and finding, the most bizarre things, which would then be a struggle, of course, to clear the rights for. And actually use it as a creative tool. I often do that. Spontaneously creating a scene within half an hour, just taking inspiration from a YouTube clip, throwing it in, and see what happens, and then take it from there.
Another adventure, I would say, with an American guy in Berlin with YouTube and everything. So yeah. I guess the whole film must have been sort of an adventure. I also wanted to ask you about your cooperation with Martin Goldsmith, because I guess without him the film couldn't happen. He wrote 2 books about his family. So how did he react to the idea, and how much input did he have in the film?
I think he was pretty interested from the beginning. I think he understood quite well what I wanted to do, and we share a great interest in music. Martin is a classical music radio host in America, so this was a great starting point for us. And don't forget, this is very much a music film, and one of the reasons why I did it.
There is so much music, sorry to interrupt you, that you can hear and just enjoy.
It's an excuse to use the greatest masters. Tchaikovsky, Beethoven, all those guys, which you normally cannot put into a film without being pretentious, right? Mm-hmm. If you put it in as your own musical comment to what's going on, it will always be too much. But here, they were part of the drama. The kids were playing this in the orchestra. So we were allowed to play this wonderful music, so to speak. And that was, of course, for me, very exciting in itself. And this is something I really shared with Martin. But otherwise, he was there, an active member of the part. He's a co-writer of the script. So it is very much a very close collaboration, actually, to bring us to here.
And I cannot not ask the question about Bruno Ganz, and this turned out to be his latest part. How did he enjoy the idea of filming it, of joining your company, and how did he find himself in this kind of he was an amazing actor, so it was natural for him, but did he have any questions about, because he is the father, but we know this is Bruno Ganz, but I kept on forgetting about it. I really saw the man there, and well, congratulations on that for you, and of course for Bruno Ganz, but on his part, if you could just, tell us a few words.
Well, Bruno was a very professional man, and he would go to his job without much talk or much discussion or debate. As he read the script, he liked the script, he did the script, boom. So, and he did hardly change the comma. As normally I would say, and certainly to a master like him, I said, look, Bruno, if there's something we should phrase in a different way, or think is more natural, you're free. Of course, I said, it's just a script, we can work from next. No. This is a script I learned. He was sitting on his bench in the park in Zurich all summer, learning it inside out, and then so that's what we do. So he was not a man, and I have met that also with other senior professionals. There is not so much talk. Let's just get started. Let's just work, and then we'll find out along the way. It's really a very undramatic process and rather unemotional too. The only thing that was difficult or complicated was, of course, he was already at that time getting sick without really having a diagnosis. So that I know it was a tough time for him to do this shooting in Arizona, and I'm very impressed actually how disciplined he was from the beginning to the end, considering his condition.
He carries the film really, because we don't see the son, we only hear his voice. And the whole responsibility of the emotional state of the viewer who is seeing the film is based on Bruno Ganz' performance, and how reliable, how truthful he can be in being Mr. Goldsmith and telling his story, being the father. And we have to remember that's like in the 90s, not today. So it's I think everybody will be impressed with what they see. And I personally, I kept on forgetting this is Bruno Ganz. I saw the man, and as you said, I saw the drama, not anything else.
Well, that's great.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about, I wanted to ask you before that, but I forgot, and now it kind of came back to me, about Jüdische Kulturband. I was wondering, how is the Jewish community seeing this today, and have you got any feedback? Because I guess there might be this slippery part that perhaps somebody who joined and played in the bands, in the cabarets, etc., were they seen as I don't know, perhaps even traitors for somebody, that they kind of followed something that was signed by Goebbels, and they knew it, but they went to it. So I'm wondering, how is the Jewish community see? How do they see it today, and how was it back then, if you've learned anything about that?
It's an interesting question. I haven't met much criticism yet, but so they could still come about how I portray this Kulturband in a rather, in a way that wakes controversy, saying it straight out that this was Goebbels' propaganda instrument. Mm-hmm. However, there have been two different ways of looking at it, and for a long time there has been a kind of more comfortable narrative to say there was some kind of resistance movement almost, because it was initiated by Jews, by this singer, Dr. Singer. And somehow there's been a narrative trying to say that this was our way of manifesting ourselves in the middle of Nazism and music as an opposition to fascism and stuff like that. And it's very sweet, but it's also a bunch of nonsense. First of all, to put art against Nazism is not the way it works. Mm-hmm. Nazis love music. And the greatest musicians, many great musicians of Germany were convinced Nazis. Furtwängler and Hitler, that was a nice combination, worked fine. Unfortunately, it's not so simple that the beauty is the opposite of the bad. Mm-hmm. So this is the one thing that's really important for me to clear up. It's rather opposite. that seduced by beauty, you might then run the errand of the bad. Right. This is rather what we're discussing. And I think that might be a refreshing point in this time and day and time where we tend to see that the good things, the progressive things are also the things that are beautiful, but it's not necessarily how it works. And this is just a reminder.
And people had to make their choices because they wanted to make living. They learned their craft, and they wanted to follow it.
And they'd rather be a musician playing Wagner, actually not allowed to play Wagner, but playing great music in Germany than to be a cleaning lady in America.
Exactly.
You know, consider that. So that's how complicated life can be.
And there is also very interesting also thing mentioned in the conversations that and how the cultural bands changed and how the Nazi program changed. That at one moment they said they were playing all the Shakespeare, Molière, etc., and all of the arts of Europe, I would say, and then they were made to play in Yiddish or just Yiddish tradition. And then we come back to this part of identity, I guess, that they were Germans. They wanted to use the whole scope of what is out there, not to be put into one box of. There were, for example, a lot of films in Yiddish in Poland, like with Michał Waszyński, for example. I guess you might have heard. So there were some Yiddish actors in Poland, and they wanted to do it from the beginning. But this is a completely different story with culture band, when they were made into the language they probably didn't know even, some of them.
Exactly, and that is a very important theme for me. This whole thing about the German Jews' Germanness. It's something that's slightly different. I know it's certainly in Russia, partly also in Poland, there have been different Jewish cultures. There's been an urban Jewish culture, which was very much Poles like everybody else, the big cities, I suppose, not these type of.
There were plenty of Jewish artists that put
that were kind of assimilated, if you like, or what have convened on an urban culture, which brought together anybody, Poles, Lithuanians, Jews. There are many, even in Poland those days, there are many people, right? Germans and so on, into some kind of urban style culture. And then of course there was a countryside style, if you like, the shtetl, or the Jewish village and stuff like that. That was all gone in Germany by then, in the 20th century. There was only left pretty much the assimilated, more German than the Germans. In fact, you could also say they have always been Germans, because they've been said there since the Middle Ages, and they would say we are German like Bavarians and Swabs, we're just Jewish Germans. So, but the important thing is, of course, that they felt, or George at least, and many others felt that when they were told they were Jews, they were reduced to some kind of tribal identity, primitive identity, even medieval understanding of themselves as belonging to a particular religion or belonging to ethnicity. And for them, it's like, oh my God, my whole life is about that I'm a citizen in a modern state called Germany. I believe in modern culture, enlightenment. This is what I live, this is what I breathe. And now you're telling me to go back, forget about all that, and go back to the synagogue, or to, or speak a different language. As they couldn't put it together. For them, Germany was the biggest civilizations ever created. Remember again, before Hitler, before Holocaust, where all this colored our impression of Germany. By then it was, in their eyes, the most sophisticated culture that ever existed on Earth. And they wanted to stay part of that.
And then they couldn't. I was wondering if you think that there is not only this historical value of your film and the personal and emotional, but it could be also relevant for what is happening around the world today. And with all the immigration crisis, with talking about assimilation or integrating another nations. Do you think that also?
I make no secret about that. I think this is an argument, somehow a point about assimilation, how that can be actually might be a good thing. If you can assimilate to a higher level, if everybody assimilates to something higher than where it came from before, then I thought might not be such a bad idea. Instead of being already constantly obsessed with your particular identity and how you're different from others. I'm very much intrigued by people who think, how am I like the others? And that is implied in assimilation, in agreeing on culture, state, civilization, instead of only being obsessed with your particular identity. I'm very worried about that. I think our society is going to fall apart if we can't find citizenship on a higher level.
Mm-hmm. And some sort
so although you can say that George was mistaken, there's a tragedy, he believed in his country because, look, it took everything away from him, I'm still moved by his high set of values around assimilation, around citizenship.
That built him as well. We are running a little bit out of time, so my last question would be like, what are the plans for the film now in Krakow? Or is it going to be shown also on other festivals, or I don't know, also for wider audiences?
It will travel to America, of course, and that's what's going to happen next. It's going to be interesting, but I'm also very interested in the cinema distribution that's going to happen in Germany. I have already picked up that this film has been surprisingly well received in Germany. I thought they would be fed up with this topic. I said, like, another Holocaust movie, we can't take it. But it seems that there is something for the German audience to relate to, or that it swings well here. So that's exciting. And of course, I am so many other pretty hard hit by Corona. I have actually not much idea what's going on out there because I'm sitting here talking to you on a computer screen and I don't have the physical sense of what's cooking with the film. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So we'll see. As a patience, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, that's the world we kind of got into with the online, but at least some sort of the content of the film. Yeah. Thank you so much for talking with me and with showing your film to the audiences. I would really love for the film to have some also wider distribution in Poland. It would be great.
Oh, that would be fantastic. Yeah.
I guess it can resonate in Poland as well, quite well. And another Holocaust film which proves that there should be plenty of other Holocaust films because there is so many stories to be told.
It is part of our lives. So still. So sad I can't be in Krakow, one of my favorite cities on earth. So really. But,
I hope it will happen perhaps with your other film in the future.
We hope so.
Fingers crossed. Thank you so much. And I would just like to remind all of the viewers that there are all other Q&As after the screenings, and the festival lasts until the 7th of June. And look for Winter Journey. And our guest was Anders Østergaard. Thank you so much. Have a good day. Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.